So today's lesson is on perfect squares and factoring them. So if we start with 2x plus 3 squared, we can double square this. So the first term squared is 4x squared. Multiple of the middle two is 6x times 2 would be 12x. And the last term, 3 squared, would be 9. So if you notice, there's a couple properties that they have. So if we look at the next problem, 16x squared plus 24x plus 9, if we notice the first term is a perfect square because this 16 square root is 4 and the x squared square root is x. So the square root of the first term would give us a 4x. And then next, if we look at the last term, it's also a perfect square because the square root of 9 is 3. And then if we look at the middle term, it's 2 times the product of the square roots of the first and the last term. So in order for us to say that it's a perfect square, it needs to have each of the 3 qualities. So now we can test it out by determining if each of the trinomials is a perfect square. So for the first one, we have 9y squared plus 24y plus 16. We look at the first term, we have 9y squared. The square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of y squared is just y. So the first term is a perfect square. Now we have to look at the last term, 16. That is also a perfect square because the square root of 16 is just 4. And now we multiply our 3y times 4 is 12y and double it to get 24y. And that fits our middle term. So now we can set up our perfect square by taking our first term, which is 3y, adding it to our second term, which is a positive 4, and squaring it. So 3y plus 4 is our squared term. Now let's look at number 2. We have 2a squared plus 10a plus 25. Look at the first term. Is there a perfect square for 2? The square root of 2 is a number, not a whole number. So since this test fails, this is not a perfect square. And number 3, we're going to factor. So going back a couple sections ago, I can factor out a 2 first, and then I'm left with x squared minus 16. And now I can factor my perfect squares. Since it's a negative, I have 2 times x plus 4 times x minus 4. And number 4, I want you guys to factor on your own so you can pause the video and work it through. And you should get a factored solution of 3x plus 5 times 4x minus 5. Now we are going to solve equations. And we can solve the first one. We have x squared equals 36. We can square root both sides. The square root of x is just x. And we have the square root of 36, 6. But we have to include a positive and negative, so a plus and a minus, since both a positive 6 squared would give us 36 and a negative 36 squared, or negative 6 squared would give us a positive 36 as well. Number 6. Again, we have a minus 10 quantity squared, so we can take the square root, and what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So we're left with a minus 10, as the square root of 121 is 11, and we need to include the positive and negative. So we're going to have 2 solutions. we have a minus 10 equals a positive 11, or a minus 10 equals a negative 11. We can solve the first one for a by adding 10. A equals 21 is one of our solutions. Then we can solve the second equation for a, and we get a equals negative 1 is another solution. So the next problem, we have x plus 9 squared equals 36, and we can take the square root of both sides, giving us x plus 9 equals a plus or minus 6. And then, since we have two terms again, a positive and negative, we have two equations. X plus 9 equals a positive 6, or x plus 9 equals a negative 6. We can solve the first one for x by subtracting 9. So x equals a negative 3. Solve the second one by subtracting 9. X equals negative 15 is our second solution. And finally, number 8. We have z plus 3 squared equals 26. And we take the square root of both sides, and we're left with z plus 3 equals 26 isn't a perfect square, so we just leave it under the square root and put a plus and minus in front of it. We still need to solve for z, so if we subtract 3 from both sides, we have z equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 26 is our solution. And that is the lesson on perfect squares.